We are over halfway through August. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming you know what that means. College football is back. I did preview videos for each of the Power 5 conferences, handed out season win totals and futures. But today, we're going to focus on two independent teams, Notre Dame and BYU, as well as the main group of 5 conference that I handicap. And that's going to be the American Conference. Maybe it's because I grew up in Houston, but I've always felt that was the best G5 conference. It's the one I've always followed the closest. So I'll give you a brief overview of the American as well. Before we get started, if you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like. That really helps out me and what I'm trying to build here. If you don't want to miss any of the upcoming content, feel free to subscribe as well. And then comment any agreements, disagreements. I can handle it. Just leave it in the comments below. You can also follow me on Twitter at Fordham Betting. That is my main platform. I'm going to be doing YouTube content all throughout the regular season, which obviously starts next weekend. But last year in college football, hit at a 55% clip and netted over 27 units. Feel even better about how I'll do this year. With that being said, I'm going to start with the big name of this video, Notre Dame. I'm kind of torn on Notre Dame. I think they're a high floor team. Meaning that I have a hard time seeing them go 6-6, 7-5. But with that being said, I just don't know how much elite talent is on this team. It really starts with quarterback. I mean, Tyler Buckner is a guy that, played minimally last year, but he was less than 60% completion. He's anything but an established commodity entering this year. I do think he was the better option for Marcus Freeman, given that he's better with his legs, and Drew Pine didn't separate himself in this competition. So I'm not saying that Buckner is not the best option, but with that being said, he's unproven throughout a full season. So I worry about that a little bit. If they had a little better projected run game, maybe I feel better about how Buckner fares. But I mean, both Chris Tyree and Logan Diggs were under 5 yards per carry last year. Tyree is good as a receiver, but I just don't know how much they're going to be able to establish a run game. I mean, they're probably going to get into some third and long situations. That's not really Buckner's forte. The one thing Buckner has at his disposal, I mean, Michael Mayer may be the best tight end in college football. Could be a first-round pick. He's probably going to be needed quite a bit because, once again, I just don't know, who that go-to guy is on the outside. I think that's probably one of the bigger concerns for Notre Dame this year is what they have in that wide receiving core. One other strength, though, and something I put a lot of stock into, I think their offensive line will probably be the strength of the offense. I mean, they got a lot of experience up there. Having Mayer and then an experienced offensive line is sure to help. And I do think that elevates the floor of their season, but just don't know how difference-making this offense is really going to be. Defensively, I think they're going to be really good in their front four, going to be good in the pass rush. And I think they're pretty solid in their interior defensive line as well. Obviously lost Kyle Hamilton in the secondary, pretty hard to replace. Both of their starting cornerbacks do return. Don't feel great about the depth at that position, but if both of their corners stay healthy, should be able to hold up pretty well. Linebackers should be solid too. It's just more about, I think guys are going to have to take on a bigger role this year. I'll say one thing right off the bat. I mean, not only is Notre Dame probably going to lose to Ohio State, there's zero chance they're winning that game. That early in the season, with how many questions they have, they can't keep up with a team like Ohio State. I 100% a loss for me. Should bounce back with 2 wins. I think at North Carolina is tough. I mean, Mac Brown has said, this is the most question marks he's had about a team going into a season. I give Notre Dame the slight edge in that game. But after that bye week, they played BYU in Las Vegas. I'm going to talk about BYU next, but I think that's a toss-up game. I really like BYU. I think they can match Notre Dame's physicality up front. And I think, what they have with Jaron Hall, I think they might, going into the season at least, they have a better run game. I think that's a game that Notre Dame could absolutely drop. And that kind of gives you a hint of how I feel about BYU. The rest of the way, I just don't see you beating Clemson at home. And I'm not particularly high on Clemson either, but that's just a tough game for me to see you winning. I think at USC at the end of the year too, just with, I have my concerns about USC at the start of the year, just a lot of guys playing together for the first time. But by that point in the season, that offense should be humming. So that's going to be a tough game to keep up with as well. Their season win total is at 8.5, 9, depending on where you look. Like I said, with the offensive line, with Mayer, I think they're pretty solid defensively as well. I think this team is a high floor team, but with them being, number 5 in the AP poll, I think that's downright crazy. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think this team has got at least 2 losses on their schedule. I think 8-4 is probably where I land. That's not enough for me to be on the season win total under, but I don't think this team is a legitimate playoff contender yet. And the one other thing too, Marcus Freeman is a first-time head coach. If that Fiesta Bowl last year was any indication, he's got ways to go. he's not a proven in-game coach yet. And, they're probably going to play a lot of tough games. So that's kind of where I am on the Irish this year. I kind of hinted at it a second ago. I played BYU over the 8 wins. I really like this team. Once again, their strength, much like Notre Dame's, is along their offensive line. And I think Jaron Hall is one of the more underrated players in the country. I mean, last year, 64% completion, almost 9 yards per attempt, 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's also very mobile as well, over 300 yards on the ground. They don't exactly call his number a lot in the run game, but he can certainly move the chains when he needs to. I think this passing game is going to be quite good this year. I like what BYU has at that wide receiver position, and I think they have depth behind those frontline guys as well. The one concern might be the run game because you lose a guy as great as Ty Algier was last year. Brought in Chris Brooks from Cal. He was over 5 yards per carry this year. I played the win total over, but I am expecting a drop off in the run game. I'll be the first to say it, but overall, I think it's a very underrated offense. And it's going to be a very experienced team on that side of the ball for sure. Biggest thing defensively, if their D line can just be a bit more disruptive and just improve marginally in terms of pass rush, I think there's going to be a really good defense once again. I mean, really good at linebacker. Now, they had some injuries at that position a year ago. They obviously can't afford that once again because I do think their frontline linebackers could be great. And they have a very reliable secondary as well. Not only that, so I mean, season 1 totals at 8. I told you I played it over. I mean, that week 2 game against Baylor, I lean towards a win for them in that game. I mean, Baylor's got a great front four defensively, but like I said, BYU has the physicality on their offensive line to match up. And really, aside from that, I have question marks about Baylor. They're going to be, I mean, that's going to be Blake Shapen's first road start throughout his career. Provo, Utah is a tough place to play. If you're asking me now, I do think BYU wins that game. I'm marking it up to a slight win. Clearest loss I see on the schedule is that next week. Aside from quarterback, I really like that Oregon team. Thought Mario Cristobal did a fantastic job on the recruiting trail. I think early in the year, that's going to be a tough game for BYU and go win. But I mean, aside from that, I mean, they're probably going to lose to Arkansas at home. But I mean, you got to remember, I talked about this in the SEC video, but that's going to be Arkansas's second straight road game. Kind of comes at a weird spot in the season, like, right smack dab in the middle of conference play. I mean, once again, it's a tough place to go play, and it's going to be very unique for a lot of those guys on Arkansas. I'm very high on Arkansas, so on paper, I do mark that up as a loss, but I mean, it's still a game where BYU could surprise people. Aside from that Notre Dame game, which if you had to ask me today, I think BYU wins the game, but for the purposes of this, mark it up as a toss-up. I mean, where are they losing the rest of the way? I mean, Liberty's not as strong this year. You get East Carolina at home, which is a cross-country trip, and I think East Carolina is good but not great. I mean, who's Utah Tech? I mean, I've never heard of Utah Tech before. I know at Boise figures to be tough on paper, but I mean, Boise State offensively is just not what they used to be. I think it'll be a close game, but I do give BYU the edge there. Suffice to say, I thought this team I had them over 9 wins. It's probably just because I see them stepping up better against Baylor, Notre Dame, even Arkansas, but probably more than other people do. Suffice to say, I mean, this team's not going 7-5. I played the over 8 wins on them. As far as the American Conference, obviously it's been dominated by Cincinnati. They made the playoff last year, which was a big deal for that conference. Well, now they're leaving to the Big 12. I think that gap is kind of closed a little bit because you lose a guy like Desmond Ridder, who Desmond Ridder was not an elite quarterback by any means, but I mean, was a very experienced guy last year, very reliable. They got Ben Bryant over from Eastern Michigan, who, was around 70% last year, 8 yards per attempt. But he's not the same type of mobile guy that Ridder was, who can move the chains with his legs. And this is a step up in competition as well. I think Evan Prater is the guy with the higher upside, but we just don't know how consistent he can be yet. So I think quarterback will take a step down for Luke Fickell's program. The other thing too, they're good up front on both sides of the ball, and that alone is going to keep them in every game they play, and we'll probably just outright win them tons of games. But I mean, losing guys like Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant in that secondary, that doesn't go unnoticed. So they play at Arkansas week 1. I have a hard time seeing them go into Fayetteville and win that game with as many things as they're going to have to replace early in the season. I'm not saying that they're not going to contend for this conference again, but I mean, with teams like, I think UCF is going to be solid this year. We'll see about Houston, Memphis could be a sneaky team. This is a conference with a lot of parity. So I could see Cincinnati losing 3 games this year. I did have 2 season win total plays in this conference. Starting off on the positive note, I got Tulsa at 5.5 wins. I think they're a bowl team. I mean, a few years ago, it looked like Phil Montgomery was essentially on the way out. They didn't play great last year, but I mean, still went 7-6. Davis Brin is a guy that I think he can be a reliable quarterback at this level. He just got to cut down on the turnovers. I mean, 16 touchdowns to 16 interceptions last year. That's an ugly ratio. You just got to take care of the football a bit better, but they're going to be able to run the football. I mean, got 2 options. Both were above 5 yards per carry last year. So I do figure that they should be a pretty dynamic offense. Obviously, they lost Joe Gillespie to TCU, their defensive coordinator. He did a great job there. They're going to be able to get after the quarterback. And with the secondary they have, they're going to be able to match up pretty well with some of the pass-heavy attacks in this conference. They also get a very favorable non-conference schedule. I mean, by my estimation, they should start the year off 3-0. Should definitely beat Northern Illinois and Jacksonville State at home. I know at Wyoming I know that's a tough place to play. I just don't think Wyoming is a very good team. They got major quarterback concerns, and on paper, at least, games don't get played on paper, I know, but I do mark that up as a win for Tulsa. You're probably going to drop those next 2 at Ole Miss and against Cincinnati. Navy's always kind of a weird game, but I mean, Temple is going to stink this year. Temple legitimately might not win a conference game. I was this close to playing their win total under the 2.5 because it's heavily juiced to the over. I'll play against that. I'll make that an unofficial play. I think Temple sucks, but I mean, they should beat Tulane at home. They should beat South Florida at home. And like I said, I don't think SMU is a complete football team. So with Tulsa's strength being their secondary, I think they can match up pretty well with them, and even maybe a team like Houston at the end of the year, who obviously lost their running back for the season and just might not be that balance of an attack. So I think Tulsa goes at least 6-6. They had major turnover issues a year ago. They didn't play great by my estimation. And they still won 7 games. So I thought 5.5 was a bargain. If you're asking me why I think that they've kind of downgraded Tulsa, I just think some of the upper echelon teams in this conference, maybe like Houston, we're going to get to SMU in a second, but I think they're good, but they have their holes too. And I think people are going to overlook a team like Tulsa in favor of a team like Houston, but the reality of it is Houston has got their flaws too. So I think Tulsa can compete against some of the upper echelon teams in the American. That's why I went ahead and played their over 5.5 wins. I just alluded to it. SMU is a team, 7 wins. I know they got Tanner Mordecai back. I know they got things working for them offensively, but this is going to be a terrible defense. I played SMU under the 7 wins, just a quarter of a unit play. So it's not a large wager by any means. But I mean, with that being said, their back 7 defensively specifically, I mean, linebacker, I have no idea what they're going to look like at linebacker. I think that's a huge unknown on this team. And then their secondary was just extremely inconsistent a year ago. And now you have a new defensive coordinator in Scott Simons coming over from Liberty. It takes time to adjust different systems. If they weren't good last year, I think that back 7 is going to have a rough go of it this year. Now, they are good up front defensively. Think they'll be able to handle the run okay, and think they could get after the passer in some of those more favorable matchups. I think their offense is good. I mean, I think Tanner Mordecai is a good quarterback option. He's obviously experienced at this point, almost 70% last year, 39 touchdowns as well. So I think that's a good option for Rhett Lashley here in year 1. You've also got Preston Stone as well, who it seems like he might be too talented to keep on the bench forever. Kind of similar to how I talked about with Notre Dame. This is just not a very balanced attack. I mean, neither of their returning running backs averaged over 5 yards per carry last year. So in some of there's good defenses in this conference. There's going to be plenty of games this year where Tanner Mordecai can't carry this offense on his arm alone. So I worry about the run game a bit. I also think they lost a lot at wide receiver. Just some of those second, third, fourth options. I mean, yeah, you bring in Bo Corrales from North Carolina. Yeah, you bring in Kelvonte Dixon from Texas, but there's probably a reason why those guys transferred out of those programs. I mean, the offensive line is going to be good. I'm not even going to try to downplay that, but I mean, let's look at their schedule. That week 1 game at North Texas, I know not very many people know a lot about North Texas. I'm not claiming that I'm the expert on the Mean Green, but that's not an easy game early in the season. I mean, North Texas should make a bowl game this year. Like I said, with as many questions as SMU has defensively, that's not a surefire win. They're not going on the road and beating Maryland. Maryland is just too dynamic offensively. With how dynamic that Maryland offense figures to be, I just have a hard time seeing SMU being able to step up in that matchup. That TCU game, coming back after that game, you play TCU at home. I have a lot of the same concerns about TCU as I do SMU. I mean, I think TCU, they got two good quarterback options, home run hitting running back, maybe one of the best receivers in college football. That's great, but TCU's defense is going to stink too. So that's a game I can tell you. I don't care how high the odds makers make it. I'll probably be on that over. Should be a high possession game where there's lots of offense and little defense. Should be a one possession game either way. I think SMU can actually win that game, but I think at UCF is a tough game that I chalk up as a loss. Playing against Navy is never easy, but you do get them off the bye, so probably do win that game at home. I'm not going to expect you to step up and beat Cincinnati. Even those games on the road, like at Tulsa, at South Florida, at Tulane. I know, especially South Florida and Tulane were not good last year, but it ain't easy to win on the road in conference play. And just how I view some of the issues of this SMU team, that becomes even more true. I think they probably split those two games against Houston and Memphis. I've kind of expressed my concerns about Houston as well. I think they'll have a really good passing game, but that doesn't necessarily equate to wins. I feel like you got to have a balanced offense at some point, and they just don't have that right now. I think losing their top running back for the year probably hurts that cause as well. I actually think SMU could step up in that game because, like I said, their strength offensively might be their offensive line, and it's just going to have to be playing Houston because Houston can really get after the quarterback. We'll see where SMU is late in the year when they play Memphis. I think Memphis is a team that I don't have a great feel on preseason. I think they're going to play a ton of toss-up games throughout the year, so I don't have a great read on that game yet. It's obviously in like week 13, so it was just a quarter of a unit play, but I did play SMU under the 7 wins. I think there's more than 5 losses on the schedule. I mean, starting with week 1, I think that's a losable game, and which is as many question marks as I have specifically about this defense. I mean, you have to have complete teams to compete for championships. It's just that simple. And I know Tanner Mordecai is a solid quarterback, but he's not so game changing as to where I think he can maybe overcome some of SMU's problems. So first-year head coach Rhett Lashley, I think he's got more on his plate than he can handle. I played SMU under the 7 wins. All right, guys, quick video today. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Like I said, next weekend, I'm recording this on Saturday the 20th. Next weekend is our first slate of college football. I know it's short, but we do get that Nebraska Northwestern game. And we've got some other games to go along with that as well. Throughout this coming week, I'm going to have full breakdowns on each of those games that we're going to see next Saturday. I'll do individual videos for those. And I'll post them. And what I'm going to do is I'll have a playlist on this channel. It'll say week 0 games. So, if you want to just listen to that playlist, it'll just run down game by game, but I'll post those as individual videos. And that's something I'm going to do throughout the football seasons. I can't believe it. I mean, talking season is finally over. It's time to put up or shut up for a lot of these teams. I feel great about where I'm at preseason. Like, subscribe, comment. I appreciate all y'all for tuning in. One more thing before I peace out. If you want to support me in the channel, you see this shirt right here. I know you've been staring at it the whole time. If you want to support me, head over to proud90.com. They got a great selection of unique but comfortable golf polos. Also have more traditional styles as well. I mean, they obviously got polos, but they got t-shirts, hoodies, quarter zips. They got all your golf apparel needs. If you want to support me and support Proud90, go to proud90.com. If you see anything you like at checkout, as you enter your payment information, enter the code Fordham. That's going to get you 15% off your order. Code Fordham at checkout is going to get you 15% off your order. Support me, support Proud90, proud90.com, code Fordham. All right, guys, thank y'all for tuning in. Subscribe here on YouTube, and I'll be back here in a few days. Football is back.